I've been playing Dark Souls for the first time the last fucking week or so. Finished Bloodborne about 2 weeks ago for the first time. Everybody I know is really big into the Soulsborne series, the Dark Demon Blood series, or whatever you want to fucking call it. And I've always been really hesitant to get into it. I've never been a fan of the general conceit of having slow, plodding combat locked to a limited resource in terms of stamina. When I grew up playing Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, which is like the exact opposite of that, and that's kind of really the kind of action game that I'm really fucking into. But I surprised myself by getting into Bloodborne, sitting on the couch, fucking dying, having nothing else to do, and needing to do an I Am Game stream while Digi was gone. So I fucking took it upon myself to boot up Bloodborne, play a few hours, and see maybe this time I'll get into it. Because I played it years ago when someone bought it for me for Christmas. And got up to the Bloodstarved Beast, wasn't having it, turned it off. But this time something clicked, you know? Because I was playing it the week before Digi moved and I moved back. Moved back to where I am right now, the parents' house. Very dignified. Having a spine injury really makes you feel like an accomplished adult when you have to come crawling back to your fucking parents and hide there while you're trying to figure out how you're gonna get your spine operated on. Fun fucking times, let me tell you. But regardless, it's giving me tons of time to play fucking video games. Being fucking trapped on the couch, unable to stand for more than 5 minutes, my friends, let me tell you. It really opens up the table in terms of game time. You know, I can go back to my shelf of like the last 5 years of games I've purchased from the GameStop bargain bin, because that's kind of how I buy games now. And oh man, all these games that I've bought and never found time for, all of a sudden my schedule's wide the fuck open. I can play whatever I want. So Bloodborne was first on the chopping block. And between ending that first stream and the 2 days it took to kind of get back settled here, I was like, holy fuck, I can't stop thinking about Bloodborne. I think I might actually kind of like this game now for some reason. So I played through all of it, bought the DLC, fucking curb stomped the game. Really enjoyed it. Might do a more structured video on it at some point, even though it's fucking old ass fucking hat now. Even now, a week out, I can't stop thinking about Bloodborne. I'm more excited to play Bloodborne again than I am to finish fucking Dark Souls. Which I guess, you know, if you watch I Am Games, you already know my initial thoughts on Dark Souls. And while I am almost done with Dark Souls, I'm on the last fucking soul in Lost Izalith, whatever the fuck it's called. That's where I'm at right now. I need one more soul to put into the Lord Vessel, and then I'm off to Gwyn. I'm assuming Gwyn's the final boss. So I think I'm pretty close to the end of the game now. Still not really enjoying it. I'm not going to get too much into my feelings on Dark Souls at the moment. I already got me enough shit in my last video on I Am Games. But what I wanted to talk about was the discourse following that vlog I did. You don't need to watch it to really understand. I just basically said I'm not a huge fan of Dark Souls conceptually. The combat loop really doesn't feel as satisfying to me in comparison to something like Bloodborne. My conceit was that I understand this is a good game, it's just not my kind of game as someone raised on fucking crazy character action games. Doesn't really caress my balls in the right way to get me erect, if you know what I'm saying. So Dark Souls has really been a test of my patience, and I just want to beat it to say that I have. It is a very aggressive playthrough I'm doing right now, spurned purely by spite, by hatred. I just want to get it out of the way, just be like, yeah, I did it, I get it. So every time I talk about Dark Souls, people can't just say, oh, get good. I want to get good, beat the game, and be like, I still have my issues with it. So what's the argument beyond get good? And my contention with the game, and really what I want to talk about, not Dark Souls. So fucking forget I even said Dark Souls. I might even bleep the fucking name out. My point is that the conversation in response to Dark Souls, and a lot of people that I've talked to about the game, has been like, why are you so fucking hyper-focused on the combat? Dark Souls isn't about the combat, it's about exploring this world that doesn't care about you. It's about being a small, tiny, insignificant speck in a big, cruel, uncaring world, and carving your way through it irregardless, and it's about meeting challenge, and overcoming incredible odds, and all this shit. And I've seen videos of people saying like, oh, Dark Souls cured my depression. I was really depressed and it gave me this whole new lease on life and changed my perspective. And people really talking about how impactful and a big deal this game is to them. And that's really why I fucking am powering through it, because I would love to get to the other side of this fence. I want to love Dark Souls. I want to have a powerful experience like that so many other people had, you know? And I can't, because my big contention and the point of this fucking video, as you've probably already noticed by reading the title, is that it's all about the gameplay loop, right? Everyone is talking about how Dark Souls isn't about the combat, it's about this world and the exploration, the way the world is kind of so greatly designed and interconnected, or it's about the sensation of overcoming challenge and things like that. And these are all parts of the game. granted. However, games can do all that, right? Like, you can have games with like theming and world building and lore and exploration, but that's all. I don't want to say window dressing. Window dressing is not the right word. It's just, it's in service of the core of the game, right? The gameplay loop. That is what you do. That is how you interface with all of these things, right? How do you interface with the world? How do you interact with the world? Through the gameplay loop. How do you make progress through this world and explore more of it? It's through the gameplay loop. How do you find out more about the story and become an active participant in the themes the game is trying to profess? It's by going through the gameplay loop. So if your gameplay loop is unsatisfying, in my opinion, no amount of window dressing is really going to fix it, right? If you have a game with a really great story and really shit gameplay, you've played a bad game in order to experience a good movie, in my opinion. Because the game isn't really serving anything, right? It's just a plotting experience that's moving you through to get to that story. That's kind of how I feel, really, honestly, replaying like some of the older Metal Gear Solid games. I know that's sacrilegious to say, but like those gameplay loops were never my favorite, you know, especially like Metal Gear Solid 1. I love that game to fucking death. It's up there, like one of my favorite games, but it's really one of my favorite movies, you know, as nonsensical as it can get. Like the raw gameplay in that's not the best. The gameplay loop in that is like not nearly as engaging or interesting as the narrative and the characters and what it's trying to talk about. Same thing really with Metal Gear Solid 2. So that's kind of my point. And to go back to Dark Souls, it's just like, for me, the core gameplay loop is not there. And I think a game really needs to nail that. And a lot of complaints are people saying, well, that's an RPG. You shouldn't expect good combat in an RPG. Why shouldn't I expect good combat in an RPG? Especially if combat is like 90% of my time spent in the game, right? Like, let's think about it. Because people who are saying, like, oh, Dark Souls is about the sensation of accomplishment, right? Of overcoming these challenges. And I agree, that's a huge part of the appeal of the game, right? It's especially how it's marketed, you know, prepare to die. Like, clearly, the idea is that this is a huge fucking 90-degree uphill challenge, and you're going to get stomped on constantly. And the idea is that overcoming that feels great. It's true, but hear me out here. If there's, like, let's say 15 bosses, and let's say 15 bosses, and let's say 30 areas, you know, just to pull numbers out of my ass. I don't really know what the numbers are, but just let's not even say this is about Dark Souls. Let's say this is about a game. Let's say there's a really hard game that has 15 bosses and 30 really challenging sections throughout its levels leading up through these bosses. The idea of this game is that it's incredibly challenging, and the reward is that kind of dopamine hit you get when you finally defeated it. Let's say this is a really long RPG game like Dark Souls. It takes like 40 plus hours on your first playthrough and you don't know what you're doing. You do that, you play the game. You have 45 instances, let's say, of that cathartic success feeling. Those feelings, those dopamine spikes each last, what, like 15 to 20 seconds of that like euphoria feeling? So you get like, what, 5 to 10 minutes of that great glorious sense of accomplishment built on 40 plus hours of like really grindy, boring RPG combat. Like, again, the core gameplay loop is the core. This is what the entire game is built around. You know, you go into Dark Souls and you go to your stat screen, it's not about like percentage of world explored or amount of lore uncovered. All the stats refer to combat because it knows all you're doing is combat. You're exploring the world. Why are you exploring the world? To find things, right? And what do those things do? They help you in combat. The whole point of the game is combat at the end of the day. So when you say to me it's an RPG, the combat doesn't have to be good, I just have to look at you slack-jawed because, like, that's all you do. That's the only way the game rewards you. You go out of your way, you look for shit, you find armor, you find weapons, you find rings, you find spells. Like, that's what the game expects you to do. You beat the boss, it gives you souls to make your guy stronger so you can do better in the combat. If you want to explore the areas, you gotta first kill the mini-bosses and the enemies in combat. Like, that's the core gameplay loop. You know, if it was about exploration, it would be a walking simulator. The core gameplay loop would be moving from location to location and finding bits of narrative to expand the story. None of those are necessary. You don't have to find any lore. You don't have to go to any of the places other than the ones you have to. And the only way to get to those is through the bosses, which require to be killed through the combat loop. That is the main point of the game. And so my point is that all of this stuff is really interesting. The lore is cool. The character designs are cool. The way the world kind of loops on itself and like almost everything can link back to Firelink Shrine or other places, you know. I was in fucking Lost Izalith. No, it was in the Demon Ruins, and you just fucking take an elevator and you're up back in Quelaag's domain right where you started. It's a great shortcut that just takes you all the way fucking back. Those are brilliant. Fucking amazing. Every time I play a fucking FromSoft game, I've played Dark Souls and Bloodborne now, and I'm sure when I boot up Dark Souls 3, which I also bought, and I'm probably still gonna go through just so I can say I did, blows my mind the way everything is linked together that way. Fucking amazing. However, Bloodborne had an interesting gameplay loop. So much so that my 3 hours of playing it, second time around, it was in my head. Every night when I went to bed after playing hours and hours of Bloodborne, I would dream about Bloodborne, fucking swinging my hunter axe, beating the shit out of stuff. Every hit in that game felt amazing. The core gameplay loop is what drove me through all the challenges. The reason I fucking went and beat fucking Orphan of Kos and all the other shit, that was his name, right? Orphan of Kos? Fuck, I don't remember. It was because I wanted to feel the fucking joy of hitting him with my fucking awesome plus 10 axe, and like the sensation of combat and like the dodging and everything about the combat in that game really felt cathartic and tactile and great. Dark Souls doesn't have that. So its core gameplay loop, I have to stress this enough because I know people are already responding in the comments mad. For me! The gameplay loop for me as an individual player playing it for the first time, me only, this is my perspective alone. I am not prescribing a feeling to you, I am expressing a feeling I have. The gameplay loop for me is subpar. And so all the great fucking lore and world design and window dressing of everything else kind of falls apart because the reward for exploring is making the subpar gameplay loop a little bit more powerful. Like, my guy gets a better shield in a gameplay loop that inherently doesn't really interest me all that much. So I don't feel any real desire to fucking keep searching and looking through places. Because a game at the end of the day can only offer itself, right? Like, that's how really games are designed. You know, you play a game, and the rewards in game, especially in RPGs, are ways to make your character better so you can play more of the game. You know, it's like the classic Yahtzee quote. Why do you raid? To get the best gear and items. What do you use those items for? To raid with. That's games in itself. Games only reward you to do better in games. Games aren't paying you real money. You think Activision, Blizzard, or fucking EA is gonna pay you? Fuck no. You pay them to do the work, and then you pay them more to do more work. There's the money goes one way, my friends, especially now with fucking modern gaming. Games only reward you to be able to play the game more efficiently. That is the reward structure. So if playing the game, the core gameplay loop, is not rewarding, no amount of window dressing is ever going to make that experience any better, because it's failed for you, and I'm talking about me personally right now. It's failed me personally on a fundamental foundational level. And so no amount of greatness built on top of it is really going to affect anything. And that was my point. And that is still my point. And I'll probably make a more structured video talking about this at some point so I can be completely crucified because everybody loves Dark Souls except for me, and it really pisses me off. I want to be one of you really fucking bad. Don't let me, again, I've said this multiple times. God in fucking heaven, I wish I could be one of you. I want to enjoy this game. There's a reason why I've put 55 fucking hours now. I just checked the stats last night. A lot of that is because I just leave my Switch on at bonfires sometimes while I go do other things. So, God, I really hope at least 15 of those hours can be shaved off. But still, even still, 40 hours of my life playing a game that's fundamentally is like a 5 out of 10 for me. I want to be wrong. I still want to be wrong. Like I said in the last video, I still want to be wrong. But that's my point. My point is not about Dark Souls, but games in general. The core gameplay loop matters. This has always bothered me. I'm just kind of spin off this quickly before we're done, because this is a long fucking video. Even my laptop screen turned on. How long has it been going? Oh, only 15 minutes. It's not terrible. I think this is really one of my big issues with RPGs in general. Not even just Dark Souls. And Dark Souls is one of the better contenders in this scene. You know, like things like turn-based RPGs, especially now, because I'm an old man. I have no patience anymore. But RPGs in general tend to have like shitty feeling combat compared to something like a Ninja Gaiden. MMOs are huge fucking problem with this. Trying to have fun in the combat in World of Warcraft. Like, I'd played Dark Souls for years before going back to fucking World of Warcraft again, aka watching bars fill up the game. That, you want to talk about a bad core gameplay loop, IMO, World of Warcraft is the #1 offender. I can't believe I got to level 75, even if it was with a fucking recruiter friend. People are just like, well, it's an RPG. It's an RPG. There are the good. It's more about more than the core gameplay. But yeah, 90% of what I do in World of Warcraft is this boring gameplay loop where I'm hitting like 1, 3, 5, 7, whatever my fucking hotkeys are. Like, why not make this more entertaining if this is what I'm doing? You know, like people are just like, oh well, it's not an action game. I'm like, action games are just action games because they're focused. Like I am still a dude with a weapon fighting something right now. And like this is like the majority of what I do in games. Like most games are focused on combat in some way. So like why are we saying like certain genres don't have to have good combat because they do other things besides combat? Why not make everything the best they can be? I don't understand why every game where you have a sword doesn't feel as good as Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden. I kind of understand with MMOs because like if you have like staggers and stuff that makes hits feel more cathartic and shit like that, when you're in an MMO setting and you have multiple people online fighting the same guy, like that could fuck with other people's gameplay. So by having enemies be relatively unreactive to your hits, it kind of lets people more easily all do the same thing. Like everybody can hit their hotkeys in the right sequence and they'll all affect the enemy. But the unfortunate side is that it just makes all your hits look really fucking wet, farty, and ineffective. You know, like there's an interesting thing studying art back in the day. There's a good book on comics, on like drawing and stuff. And they're talking about how drawing like punches and stuff and how to make a punch in a comic book really feel effective. And they said it has nothing to do with the character, how strong the character delivering the punch looks. It's all about the reaction, right? And he had this really interesting like 2-panel comparison of this huge Hulk-sized muscular guy punching somebody and he barely flinched. So even though the dude looked really strong, the hit had no impact. And then he drew like a 5-year-old girl with like string bean arms who punched like the big busker dude from the previous panel and he went flying. And it just proved that has nothing to do with your character. It has everything to do with the reaction from the opponent. And that's really the problem with MMO combat. And even to an extent, Dark Souls, Final Fantasy 15 is a great, Final Fantasy 14, is a great example of this, where they add tons of crazy like effects and particle effects and things to your weapons to make it look more interesting and dynamic and stuff. That's great, but the enemies still don't respond to your hits. So at the end of the day, it's flashy to try and make you look like you're doing more, but at the end of the day, the enemy still stands there and doesn't react at all. So it kind of all falls flat. I hope I haven't just ruined Final Fantasy 14 or World of Warcraft for some people. But I feel like I'm the only one who gives a shit about these things. Like, I'm the only one who cares. I have this particular brand of autism where I have to have perfect combat and everything. Team Ninja and Capcom have ruined me for life. That's all I got. This is going way too fucking long. I thought this was going to be the shortest one. I just shotgunned like a couple of these fucking podcasts, and this one's easily the longest, and I thought it was going to be the shortest. Fucking patreon.com/polystation2 if you enjoy listening to me ranting. Donate to me, but if it's not me, donate to somebody. You know, fucking EA and Amazon, fucking Activision, fucking Warner Brothers Games, Disney, they got enough fucking money. If you're gonna give somebody a couple bucks, if it's not gonna be me, give it to some online creator. You know, we're all fucking in this together. We're all on the bottom. We're all in the 99%. Stop giving the 1% more money. They don't fucking need it. Share the love with some of the online creators making things with heart that aren't answering to fucking board members. You know, they're making shit because they want to, not because they're trying to maximize profits for their shareholders. Share the love with them. If I happen to be that person today for you, thank you. But I know you got limited money, so, you know, show somebody some love. It doesn't have to be me. That's all I got. Take it easy. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.